Okay, Mark. I've got your the blog post that you sent me,
Hmm.
which is really interesting. And so what you're saying is essentially companies are running outbound, and then they're not getting the results that they're looking for, which is pretty much every company.
Yeah, yeah.
So you've got an unlimited number of companies that you can work with, and they come to you and say, we've got this outbound motion, but we're getting diminishing results, or we're getting no results from it. Can
Hmm.
you help us to optimize it for 2024?
Yeah, and it I really do this in two different phases. So really just getting the basics right. So across the board, when I look at campaigns, the copy is we are this, we do this, we can do this, and we've done that. And it's not really focused on the prospects challenges, the pain points. So that's one kind of change that needs to happen before is like change having that mindset shift change towards making the message relevant to the challenges that your prospects are facing. I like to start there. And it's funny, David, you probably get asked tool recommendations all the time, and people are like, Mark, what's the best AI tool to use? And my answer is define your ICP and persona in a clear sentence to me, and then I'll tell you which tools to use. Because the majority of companies still need to do that basic work of really refining who their ideal customer profiles and those different segments within those are. And then that second phase that I mentioned just before we hit record was how do we leverage triggers, so signals and intent data, to then launch campaigns to those people who are more likely to be in market versus let's just send a message to every VP of marketing in North America, which is the way that a lot of people are doing it.
Okay. And so when you first have that conversation, do the companies usually say, I know my ideal, account profile, and I know
Mm-hmm.
the people that we're supposed to be, engaging with. I already know that. Like
Yeah.
we've got that covered. Do you find that if you dig in a little bit, that it's pretty vague, and it's you probably know where I'm going with this. I mean,
Yeah.
double click on it, it's like, well, actually, do you?
Yeah. The way that I frame it is that I want to see that data. I want to have a look at it. Sometimes it's not even documented, especially if it's a smaller team. If they've hired sales reps and they do typically have it documented. But I asked the question, so you have an ICP and persona and you're running outbound, but the messages aren't resonating and you're not getting replies. So let's go back to the ICP and persona and let's see if there's one that's going to be more interested or more in pain than than others. And I'll give a really quick example. A client of mine was trying to sell their service into L&D in the HR team as a benefit and a perk for a business to introduce to their company. But the platform itself actually helped marketers and product marketers. So the HR people aren't in pain. The managers of the product team and the managers of the marketing team are the ones that are in pain. They know they can't do the work or support their team as much as they can. So rather than pitch to the HR team, which is what they thought it was, because it ultimately is a HR benefit, we then started reaching out to the marketing teams, the head of growth, the head of marketing, and the head of product, and they instantly got it. And then they're the ones that push it to HR to say, we need this for the team. So that's just one example that I can think off the top of my head from a recent campaign. So you may think you have the right ICP and persona, but you're really not targeting the people that are experiencing the challenges and the problems that your solution can help them overcome.
Wow. Okay. Well, that's interesting. It's almost like a new lease on life, because
Yeah.
they were really going after what their assumption was the ICP and persona, but then you came up and refocused them, and it could open up this whole new pipeline of business. If
Yeah.
huh.
And I had a very similar conversation with a HR tech, another HR tech. Well, this first example wasn't a HR tech. It's like a marketplace of mentors where you can book on-demand calls with people. But the other one that I had a call with recently is a screening software. And again, they're reaching out to the HR people. I've been in HR. So before I moved into marketing and sales, I worked as a recruiter sitting in the HR team of a FTSE 50 company, so one of the largest companies in the UK. I had no power whatsoever to make any decisions about any new technology, even if I saw the benefits of it. But if the people that I was hiring for, which we used to call internally the hiring managers, if they came to me and just said, we want to use this technology, if they were senior enough, they would get that done and make that happen. So really it's about framing and focusing on who's going to use the tool and then who's feeling the pain the most, especially when it comes to software and tools in general.
Okay. Interesting. And so you break it down here with intent, data, and signals, and then real life examples of different triggers, and the implementation of this into your sales led GTM. So once you establish your hypothesis on the ICP and persona, how do you then use intent, data, and signals with your clients?
Yeah, so it's hard to explain without kind of drawing it all out, but let's just say that we've got a very small total addressable market of 1,000, or just a segment of our ideal customer profiles are 1,000 companies. Mm-hmm. If you go back to Chet Holmes's Ultimate Sales Machine, only 3% of your market is actively buying, 7% are open to it, which means 90%, the remainder, are not actively looking for a solution. So if you took 1,000 prospects, then 90% of those 1,000, so 900 of them, are most likely not in market if those numbers hold up. And I've seen those numbers hold up across many industries over the last few years. So when it comes to thinking about triggers and, signals and intent data, which can then trigger an outbound sequence or an engagement, it's really thinking about, okay, so out of these 1,000 people that we have here on the list, who is most likely to be in pain right now? Who is most likely to be looking for a solution? Who's most likely to be experiencing a problem that they either don't know a solution exists, or they might be solution aware and they're kind of looking at different options at the moment. So that's the first stage, really. It's just asking that question. How do we identify people who are more likely to be in pain and looking for a solution?
Okay. And then what's your next step?
So the next step is to think, okay, these people are most likely to be looking for a solution because of X. So very common triggers, signals, and intent data that you'll see is that they're hiring for SDRs, or they've just raised a round of funding. Perhaps there's some industry changes that are coming up. I think in the UK, there was a big push for using QR codes during COVID and then also after COVID too. So legislative changes can also be a great trigger. But there's 65 different triggers that you can really pick from, but it's about finding those that are most relevant to the companies that you're trying to sell to, because they're not all created equal. So maybe I can give a few more examples of different triggers that I included in the post, if that would be helpful.
Yeah, definitely. And I'm curious if you're working with a client and they have a tech stack in place, and it's outdated, or it doesn't do all the new mm-hmm. things that the latest technology does, or it's not tied together in a way that's really supportive of the strategy that you're talking about. Mm-hmm. How do you work with the clients to implement a newer set of technologies, or do they just say, hey, just use what we have? And
yeah. It's a great question, because a lot of people get married and wedded to the tech stack that they've built, and obviously built the business case to invest in as well. The way that I position this is that this is just a different data source. So we're not going to be rebuilding our entire tech stack. We're just going to plug something in. And sometimes there's some band-aids that you have to put on to make sure that everything pipes through correctly. But in most cases, David, they're using a sales engagement platform like Outreach or SalesLoft, or some of the newer platforms out there that do kind of the domain rotation. So really, it's just about adding in an additional data source and then plugging that into the sequences that they're already sending. But they'll need to create a new sequence and a new campaign, which is what I walk them through. And the way that we justify it is that, look, your existing isn't working. This is a new way to try. Nothing's ever guaranteed, but there is more likelihood that if we find the right triggers for you, and we have that data coming in, that you're going to get more replies in your sequences. And one client's campaign recently, after 3 weeks, they've managed to book four meetings with prospects from only 200 prospects that went through the sequence. So the volume isn't huge, but the quality is there. So I don't encourage people to completely throw away all of their tech stack, but I do encourage them to think differently about how they're reaching out to the 90% of people who aren't in market right now, because your goal with them is just to be top of mind for when things change and they do become in market, when they start to look for a solution.
Okay. And so I want to ask about that. What's the best way to engage the 90%? I don't know what the actual percentage is, but the vast majority of people who are not necessarily in market right now, but they could potentially become a customer if they know about what you're doing.
Yeah, so I'm going to say deliver value, David, as we've seen said for many years now. But what does that really mean? Essentially, it's coming up with a resource or a tool that they could use to do their job better now before they need to use your solution. So to give a couple of examples, if you are, so there's a great company called Personio. They do employee onboarding, and I think they do almost like SOPs as well, like knowledge management for companies. They had a great campaign, which was, if automating your employee onboarding is the best in class and the best thing to do, and we are the software to do that, but you're not doing that at the moment, and it's not a big enough problem for you to solve, what's in the middle? Like, how do we improve what you're doing from an onboarding point of view? So they produced a ton of checklists and resources for you to actually implement within your company without having to use Personio to do so. So they took what's automated from their business and just gave the manual version, but made it so much better than what the most people are currently doing, which is they just don't have an organized onboarding flow for new employees. So that's one example. I have another client who is a content agency, and some people just aren't ready to invest in certain amounts, or they are not sure about what sort of content to focus on in terms of top of the funnel, middle, bottom. So they've put together a resource which is here's how to think about the top of the funnel, the middle, and the bottom. And then if you put some information in here, it's going to spit out some ideas and suggestions for you to create content that also hits the top, the middle, and the bottom. So it's just making your prospects' lives a little bit easier with a semi solution, which is similar to the end product that you sell.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting. In that there's manual ways to solve problems out there that people are probably doing right now, and if you can illuminate that, and then as a matter of fact, we can help, but it's not necessarily a sales pitch. It's more of a educational foundation for them.
Yeah.
And when they're ready to move forward, then there you go. It's a long game.
It is. And I know a lot of your audience are salespeople, so I'll give a sales specific example. There's a CRM called Salesflare, and they knew that the majority of people move from a spreadsheet to Salesflare when they're ready to move and pick a CRM. So they knew that their prospects were already using spreadsheets, but most likely not using it to its full capability. So they just created a supercharged spreadsheet, which had as much of the filtering and automation that you can do in a one-to-many fashion, so that people could improve the way that they're working. And they were always like, and if you want to automate this stuff, and if you want to stop forgetting to follow, if you want to actually follow up with people and stop forgetting them and missing through the cracks, then a solution like Salesflare can help you do that. So it's slowly educating people and then nudging them along to your solution.
That makes perfect sense. Okay, let me see here. So signals and triggers. And so let's see, what else should we cover?
I can give a couple of different examples for triggers because I think everybody knows the funding, the hiring, and some of the obvious ones. So I can give some more obscure ones, which Won't be relevant for everybody, but if there's a few people watching this that it is relevant for, it's going to be hopefully a light bulb moment for them. Um, so an example would be if I was a HubSpot sales CRM consultant, I would want to be on the lookout for anybody who starts using HubSpot CRM, because they may run into issues where they need someone like me to help them with that implementation. They might not need a full implementation plan, but they might need an hour or two here or there. So I'm just imagining that I'm that consultant. So I would reach out to them with a, I don't know, 10 things to avoid when implementing HubSpot, or mistakes, the common mistakes that are made. If you're mapping fields, make sure you're connecting these fields to this fields. Common things that you see as a consultant would be something that I would share to add value and be like, and hey, if you get stuck, I have a team of people that can help with this. Um, if you are a PPC agency, so paid ads, and managing those for clients, if a company starts to decrease their spend or increase their ad spend, they may run into different issues. If they've increased their budget from 60K a month to 150K a month, there's a lot of risk that they're taking on by doing so. So if your agency, in this case, or software can help them with that and navigate and mitigate those risks, that would be a good time to reach out to the people who are spending and increasing their spend. What else are we looking at here? Office relocation. So one of my clients is IT hardware and also cybersecurity. So they look for, when a company is planning an office relocation, they're either moving to a brand new office or they're opening an additional office. They obviously need to think about hardware and how that maps out and how they can keep everything secure. So that's a better time to speak to a head of IT than it is just to send a message to every head of IT in your kind of catchment area or territory.
Sure. Oh my gosh. Okay. And so how do we find the signals and the information? You mentioned some tools that you use. Do you have to do it manually, or are there actual solutions that you could potentially plug in and?
Yeah, so there's no solution just yet, and I've tried to. I'm not techie, so I didn't get very far, but I tried to solve the solution of, here's my client, here's what I sell, tell me which triggers to use. And I can do that in my head and over a conversation with a prospect, but I didn't work out a way to kind of automate that. But once you've identified the trigger event or the signal that you'd be looking for, then really the tools out there that you should choose are very much dependent on that particular platform. So if you're looking at intent data like first and third party, then Sixth Sense is one of the bigger intent providers. There's also Bombora, for example. But you have these newer tools. So Triggerfy is a new tool which is in beta at the moment, which I'm testing with the team. That tracks when people are hiring particular roles, when people have moved into a new role within the last 90 days. So that's just two of the use cases of Triggerfy. They're slowly building out and adding a lot more features to their kind of to their product. But even LinkedIn Sales Navigator can tell you. Crunchbase can be great for funding. That's a great source for building your account list based on particular events. And the way that I like to think about it, David, and I teach all my clients is, let's go and build the account list first, and then let's go and find the contacts.
Mm-hmm. Think that's, you have to have that in that order, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And so your new firm is called Yellow, and is that correct?
Yellow O. It's a nightmare. I live in Portugal, and it's a nightmare to spell it out in my broken Portuguese.
And why is it called Yellow O?
It's really funny you ask, because an article came out recently, but years ago I saw an article about Steve Jobs waking up in the middle of the night, called one of his developers, because when he looked at Google on the new iPhone, on the first iPhone, one of the O's in Google, which is supposed to be yellow, was the wrong shade of yellow. And he picked up on that and recognized it. And there used to be a joke in my previous company, which I founded, which was, Mark gets an alert when in the spreadsheets that you have, they've got the wrong font. There's an alert that goes to Mark because he'll spot it. And I just have this insane attention to detail for things like that. So that personality trait and then that story, I kind of combine together.
Got it. Okay. So that personality can be very useful. And you don't want to go too far though, because then you
I know, very useful, but very difficult for my partner. Yeah.
okay. And so it's creating effective, scalable outbound prospecting campaigns for B2B SaaS companies and agencies. It's at yellowo.co.uk.
Mhm.
And then, so, and I asked you this before, but usually when your clients come to you, what's the initial, problem that they're bringing?
It's either we're running outbound and not getting the results, or not getting the same results that we used to. So that could be a deliverability problem, that could be a messaging and offering problem, it could be a targeting problem. In actual fact, David, as you know, it's a combination of all of those things. Or people come to me saying, we've tried outsourcing, we want to bring our outbound prospecting in-house now, but we don't have the expertise to build it, or the resource to kind of build it from scratch, although they may have a resource to manage it. So that's where I do the build for them and then train them how to use the tool so they can keep the IP as well.
Okay. And so there's a lot of larger companies in your client list here that you've worked with over the years, but is this usually newer companies that come to you if they don't have that motion set up?
Yeah, so newer companies tend to need the build service. They need to build that stack because they haven't reached that maturity in their sales motion just yet. The larger companies tend to be the ones that say, our sales reps are all doing different things when it comes to outbound prospecting, and we need some consistency and some accountability. So really, it's more about let's optimize what we're currently doing. And then that's where the campaign strategy work that I do to improve the campaigns. And sometimes the improvement is just the messaging, just the offer, just the targeting. Other times it's a little bit more drastic because they're doing a lot of things wrong. But I try not to say that to them too loudly.
So it's a full suite of services, that you provide.
Yeah, pretty much. It's that curse of being around in this industry for so long and being able to help so many different people at different levels. But yeah, so really the early stage C to Series A is when I'm building stuff for them, and then the Series B and beyond are when it comes to optimizing because they have teams and perhaps all of the SDRs that they've got, 20 SDRs, they just haven't had the training. Because as you know, you're in this industry, there's not that many great training providers out there, even though there's millions of sales reps out there.
Yeah, and just the willingness to invest,
Mm-hmm.
in training, especially in the tech industry. I think it's a little bit better in some other, industries, but especially for some reason in the tech industry, it's hard to get companies to really invest in training for
It,
salespeople. Yeah.
it definitely is, and that's when I like to ask the question of like, what's your average reply rates across your prospecting campaigns?
Mhm.
Oh, it's that low. What are we going to do to improve that? And that's a very cheeky way of asking, or not cheeky way of asking, but a cheeky way of pointing out that they do need some work and support. Doesn't work with everybody though.
You can't just say, "Oh, you suck."
Yeah.
Well, that's cool. Well, Mark, I'll wrap this up and get it going.